In dwelling, live close to the ground. In thinking, keep to the simple. In conflict, be fair and generous. In governing, don't try to control. In work, do what you enjoy. In family life, be completely present. Now, these are the wise words of the great Carl Jung. Hello and welcome to Bishop World. My name is Omogolo Pikinini, the Bishop himself, and I welcome you to yet another interesting episode. Today's title is Growth or the Grave, the Ultimate Choice. Now, you could say something there about my choice of titles or the phrasing, but I find them very interesting. Hopefully you do as well. Now, what is this growth or the grave? What is this ultimate choice? Now, this episode is more like a roundup on the previous episodes I've been having. I mean, we have talked very lengthy and deeply about the idea of self-development, growth, and all the things that go into it. But in this episode, I'm going to try to ground all that into one short and quick episode. I don't know how short it will be, but essentially, I'm redefining and grounding the idea of growth. Why is it the most important thing you could consider? Because I feel like one of the things is we usually think of growth as something passive, something we passively go through, something that is quite obvious, not something to pay mind to. But I feel like that's a very wrong way to go about your own growth, because growth itself is what I believe is the most synonymous word to life, because that's what essentially life is. It's just your journey of growth, which is why to start things off, I usually say, look, we start off as children, and usually I do make the case that we should remain that in some aspects of our being, but we still have to face a process and phases of development, psychologically, physically, emotionally, socially, and so forth. And essentially, what we regard as our lives is just this journey of transformations and expansions we make to live through the different versions of ourselves. So that is to say, we are nothing but that which seeks to see itself through all that it could be. Now, I know that sounds somewhat erroneous, but in human language, in normal terms, it means your life is simply you turning your potentiality into actuality. You are discovering and experiencing the different versions of yourselves by growing into them. So growth then is a prerequisite to human life, and we humans have a term for those who can no longer experience this growth. We call them the dead. So dead people are just those that have lost their ability to experience any further versions of themselves. And when this happens, we write it down as their last day, because any other day from that moment has no meaning and impact to them. What remains of them is potentiality that can no longer be brought into reality. So then, that is to say, the only line between you and the world of the dead is your ability to grow. And if you don't act upon that, then I don't think there's any objective way in the context of growth that we can say you are alive. I mean, sometimes I even have the evil urge to ask some people, when was your last day? But that's a story for the times to tell. So my aim instead with that is I'm trying to lay out how growth and development isn't a secondary characteristic or a demand or a part of life, as we usually say. It is what we regard as life itself. You can't fully claim life without the growth that instantiates it. So also, more importantly, or as important from that definition, you could say then that anyone or anything that claims they're helping you to live must be that which is helping you to grow. And anything that holds back your growth is helping you to die. Now that's something there. That's something to think about. And by anyone, I mean you, your parents, friends, spouse, colleagues, or whoever has a claim to be of age to your life. Because you are either growing into more of yourself or retreating into less of what you already have been. Which is why one of the most common phrases I usually say is, if you return to bed as the same man who woke up, then you were not alive for that day. You were just yesterday's duplicate on replay. A repeat of yesterday's live coverage, and like all repeating episodes, you only appeal to those that have just seen you, while the rest of those who were with you yesterday slowly lose interest in you. So, from that, it's one of the key things, or the common things you usually hear, is people saying, well, the people around me have changed, or they lost interest on me, or they no longer care as much. And I say, well, sometimes that is the case, but most of the time you would find that this is what happens when growth becomes an unconscious thing, because what usually happens in that scenario is one of the two, or one of the people in that association or group or partnership or marriage or anything has outgrown the other. And what happens is, the more we grow, the more we experience other versions of ourselves. Whatever surrounds us must also be growing in relation to that. And usually the balance or shift of relationship and association shifts when one of the two grows and the other remains stuck in time. So now that means the key responsibility of any relationship is for the two to constantly grow with each other, to push each other to become better versions of themselves. Because if the process happens in one of the two, then the other will obviously experience a different version of themselves that is obviously incompatible with what the previous version was compatible with. And usually that happens with a lot of people. They'll be like, well, he changed. It's no longer the same person I knew. Well, that's true. And your responsibility was to change in relation to that. And his or her responsibility was to make sure they help you grow along with them. So the key thing you need to do, that's also one other important thing about growth. The moment we don't pay attention to it, we outgrow the things around us. And the moment we don't grow ourselves, we get outgrown by the people we're with. So you could say the people that live through life together or aid their lives better are those that constantly grow with each other or help each other grow, in a sense. So that's one other key takeaway from this process of growth. It is life itself. And we are that which constantly discovers new versions of ourselves. And if we are to attach to anything or anyone, then they must, in relation to our growth, also undergo the same process. Otherwise, if you don't grow, you get stuck in time. Otherwise, if you don't help the people, your family grow, if you don't help your friend or your social circle grow, then you outgrow them. Then you'd obviously not fit in the same group. That's what happens usually with friends when one of them outgrows them. They would usually prefer to find a different social group, not realizing that their responsibility there is not to find a different group, but to help that group grow up to their new transformation level. That's the key takeaway from it. But then, we don't pay attention to it. We don't discuss this growth and how we don't see how it affects us, because it's something we are unaware of, in a sense. So grow, and help the people around you grow. So that is the key takeaway from this. So the natural question that you and everybody else must answer, therefore, at the end of each day is, did I help me grow? Did I help grow the people around me? If you are a parent, then the key question to answer before bed is, did I help my child grow? If you are a spouse, did I or am I helping me and my partner grow? If you are society, am I helping my generation grow? If you are government, am I helping my nation grow? If you are a teacher, am I helping my students grow? That's the ultimate choice. The growth or the grave. The growth or the grave. So that is the one choice we all have to take. And it's very paramount that we are aware and consciously make these choices and adjustments. So the process of growth shouldn't be a passive thing or regarded as something that would obviously happen with itself. I mean, physical growth will happen. If you're alive and eating physically and biologically, you will. But other aspects of our life need, as much as, even physical growth takes a whole lot of nourishing and, feeding and all sorts of things. And all other aspects of our growth and our lives require the same conscious and the same consistent nourishing. And also, most importantly, we must be aware of it. Same way we are aware of our changing body weight, the same way we are aware of our changing height physically, although we don't pay attention to it as well. We have to see our growth for what it is, for that is our life, socially, physically, emotionally, how we are transforming. And this message also goes out, like I said, essentially I talked about our association with the people. One of the key institutions of growth is the family. Now, the family, I usually say, is the primary small society where we learn to act and practice our skills before we perform them on the grand scale of society. So the quality and sanctuary of the family directly translates into whatever society we have. We don't have bad citizens, we just raise bad kids. So essentially, growth starts primarily in this institution. So it's something that needs to be consciously discussed, the growth of the children, because it affects who they become. Like I said, one other thing that James Baldwin once said is, children may not listen to their parents, but they have never failed to imitate them. So what that means is, it's a process known as observational learning psychologically. One of the key factors to our growth we need to be aware of is what we observe. And the first initial primary thing we observe is our family. So it means the family itself has to be conscious of what they are acting out, for it is what the children will imitate and act out to the world. And this is why growth is essential. This is why child development is. This is why self-development is essential. So what I'm trying to reiterate with this is, there's a reason why every time I inevitably talk about development, I inevitably talk about transformation, human growth, because the idea or the word growth is the most synonymous to life I can find. If we're going to talk about life, then we got to talk of transformations that defines life. We got to talk of your development, your psychological, social, your interactions. These are all nothing but growth. It's just phases and series. And if you're going to have what we call a conscious life, people usually tell me, well, you're conscious of a lot of things. Usually the most common term they use for people is like, you're woke. And I'm not woke, I'm just aware. That's something. It's not about being woke. It's just about being aware of the growth, being aware of the things, small things around you, being aware of how things around you affect your growth. I'm aware of who is helping me to grow and who is not. And who is not helping me to grow, the conclusion from that is I have to stay away from that person. It means I have to help them grow. So that's one other. Today I'm just going to talk about the fallacies about our understanding of growth. One of the key fallacies is, when usually I tell people you must stick around people who help you grow, then what happens to these people that we everybody's throwing around. And like, no. You missed the key point. You stick around the people who help you grow. And in that form of growth, you help those that need the growth themselves. So it's like a cycle. It's you empower yourself to empower those that could not empower you because they themselves need empowering. It's a very interesting chain of processes. So this is a discussion we need to have. Firstly, I talked of self-development, which means the discussion of your growth is something you need to have with yourself. Then from there, you need to be having that discussion with the things that aid your development. Initially, like I mentioned, your family. That's the most important institution. And usually I am saddened by how we have, in a way, destroyed the family setup. I mean, we attacked and took the power and authority of the family, forgetting that this is the very place where everything lays and is played out before it is acted on the grand stage. People talk about having good governments. That doesn't make a good nation or a good society. A good society is built by having good families, by going through a good process of growth, by helping our children to grow. And usually sometimes I would sit back and look into our generation, our society, and I see nothing but overgrown babies. I see people who are stuck in time and not wanting to grow. And one of the key things the family does is to tell you to grow the hell up. And the interesting thing, I had a very beautiful conversation with one of my friends, and it also revolves around growth. And he said, well, my family now is, this that feeling you get of imprisonment by the family and all the pressure and responsibility. And like, exactly my point. What actually happened there is not that your family has changed. It's not that, or your friends have changed in a sense. It goes back to my previous point. That's what happens when you outgrow them. So once you grow to that point where you feel you have outgrown the space around you, where your parenting or your parents, they get to a point where they no longer understand you because they still think of you as that previous version of the child or the younger version of you. So your responsibility is to help them grow up to you and define yourself as this new person. So what usually happens then, that's why around the teenage age or around the age of 18, 20, there's usually a disruption in the balance of family where children undergo this series of conflicts with their parents. So what is happening there is the child has grown, but the parenting hasn't. The parents have failed to adjust to accommodate the growth. And what happens is the child feels choked or imprisoned by the walls of self-preservation that she was put around for her own growth. And when that happens, it's what I usually say, look, they are the very same parents you loved 10 or 18 years ago. They haven't changed. What actually happened is you have grown. They just forgot to grow with you. Now it's your responsibility to help them grow up to you. And it's also the responsibility of parents to be aware and conscious of this. So you see the problems that happen when we are not aware of growth, when we don't consciously discuss it. All these problems, all these conflicts is that things happen and we don't pay attention to them. We grow, we change. But the things around us forget to change, or we forget to change them. We forget to adjust and grow and push up all these things. So the key takeaway from this series isn't really specific to what I was discussing. I was just, you got a choice to make. Either you're gonna choose the growth or the grave, because essentially it's either we grow or we die. It's either we grow our relationships or we die. It's either we grow ourselves or societies or they die out. So we all have an ultimate choice to make to everything, our relationships, our social life, our psychology, our emotions. We have to grow. That's the only thing that certifies us to be what we call the living. That's what makes you alive. That's what makes you human. If you don't undergo this process of growth, you're undergoing a slow process to the grave. You get stuck in time. People lose interest in you. The family setup gets disrupted. Society gets disrupted because kids don't grow. And when they do, they grow up and not consciously aware of what they're growing into, which is why they can just pick up toxic traits and all the things that come their way because they're unconsciously growing. The process of observational learning is a very interesting and difficult one to maneuver once you're not conscious of it. Now we have children not having the proper growth instantiated in the family. Therefore, they pick up the growth they can find out there. And usually I talk about one of the most saddening aspects, just to wrap it up, is, for example, the setup of the school. We live in a society where now our friends are somewhat more important than our family structure. School is that place where we send our children to be raised by other children. And now that becomes the primary source of our own growth, is the society or the school setup or the friend setup. Now, usually that's not the right place. You want to learn responsibility. That's not the right place. You want to learn about growth. So, firstly, fix your self-growth. Fix our families. Let's communicate this growth thing. Let's be aware and conscious of the growth of our children. Let's try to fix and readjust our relationships. If you're growing, make sure the person you're with is growing. If they don't, you will outgrow them. Then you're going to say, nah, and you've changed. You're no longer what I want. No. What happened is one of you did and the other got stuck in time. You got to all grow together. That's very important. Marriages happen like that. The other person grows and the other person is stuck with the same version. Just because you guys were compatible 10 years ago, it doesn't mean the same person will be compatible to you after 10 years. They have grown 10 years older, therefore you need a 10 years older version of you to still be compatible with that. That's important. Once we lose track of our growth, we lose track of our lives. Once we don't choose growth, we choose the graves. Once we don't answer these ultimate questions, am I helping myself grow? Am I helping the people around me grow? Am I helping as a government, whatever you are, whatever institution you should be? The only thing that would sanctify your claim to be alive and valuable is whether or not you're growing and whether or not you grow in the people around you. And that being said, I would like to bring to an end our discussion about growth and start something else maybe in the next episode very soon. And it's something very important. I wanted to go through with another topic and tackle it. I say maybe I just have to stress it more because it's very important that we understand this whole idea of growth. Maybe I just felt maybe I didn't close it off very well, and I believe this version brings into perspective why I felt the burning desire or always inevitably always revoke change or growth and consciousness. And it's very important because before we discuss anything, people usually from a motivational perspective, you jump off and talk of success and running your business. Like, no, you gotta put your life in order first. You gotta put your growth in order first. Self-development, your family, your everything. Then, if we could put that in order, then we can move on to higher order achievement. We can talk of, your career goals. You can talk of professional growth. You can talk of everything. But you don't want to go to that before you fully define what you are. I believe if you view yourself as that which is just undergoing a process of growth, then you are aware of what you are. And once you are aware of what you are aware of what you can achieve and what you need to go through to achieve that. then in the next episodes we can take it from there. We can talk about a whole lot of other things, like, professional growth, career-wise, school, all that we want to talk about. And a lot of people have been suggesting those topics to me. Well, how do you do this? Success, business, life, professional. And I don't think that's the key problem. I think the key problem is understanding what you are first, and we can talk about all that times to come. So I'm glad you could join me. Thank you very much. Enjoy your day. And this is Bishop World. Glad you could join me. Cheers.